Welcome to Puddlecast, where we discuss safety, water, environment, and career development topics. Let's jump in.
Paul Kemp, I bet I can get it done.
Yes, sir. Get her done.
Get her done.
Bet I can.
I bet you can. I bet you can. Paul and I, we have been in the industry for, well, Paul's been in it for at least 30 years, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Because when I started, you and I were sort of at different places, but I knew of you in the industry, and then we've worked together, and then we've been in the same company and worked and continue to work together now. But I just want to talk a little bit today just about pond management and taking care of these detention ponds that are out there and all the considerations that goes into that. You've been managing a lot of detention ponds for a lot of big like box stores and things like that. Let's talk it through from the beginning. What do they need to know in terms? You're going to give them a cost estimate for maintaining this pond, and that's a 2-acre pond, and it's got cattails and all that kind of stuff. What are you going to have to tell them that they got to consider for budgeting purposes?
Good question, right?
Yeah.
So for budgeting purposes, so what I will do is look at a pond.
Yep.
And I will literally put together a bid.
Yep.
Right. So let's say you look at that 2-acre pond, and it's a $50,000 bid to clean out.
Yeah.
So when I talk to them,
They've already choked, by the way.
They've already choked. They don't have 50 grand saved. No,
Because this pond
they
has
didn't
been
even
sitting
know
there for
that was
like-
a line item.
That's right. The
That's
pond's
right.
been sitting there for 20 years, and they're thinking, what? It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And I didn't know that I had to maintain this because the city inspector came and poked it and said there's cattails in there, it doesn't flow, and there's 6 feet of sediment in there.
To a teenage. So as I look at that 2-acre pond, I develop a $50,000 budget. I go back and tell them, look, guys, it's 50 grand. On average, you're going to clean this pond out every 10 years.
Yeah.
So if you keep your landscape right, and you keep the little stuff done, but we're talking the middle of this stuff, we're talking sediment buildup, we're talking things that a landscaper can't do. A landscaper can run around the perimeter and cut the little
Mow the
alder
lawn and-
saplings
yeah.
all day long. That's part of their monthly maintenance. But pond retention cleaning, I tell them, look, it's a $50,000 deal. Now, if you want to every 10 years figure this in and figure $5 grand a year, put that into your budget, let that accumulate and build up, and at the end of 10 years, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Go hire a contractor and get it clean.
Yeah.
And keep the city happy.
Right.
That's the budget.
So we got the budget, and we're now talking to them about getting on more of a routine maintenance. Are there things that you've done in the past to help? Well, let me feed this to you just a little bit. I know there are things that we have done in the past where we've put in potentially a weir at the inlet of the pond, so it becomes more of a monitoring device. We let that water go over the top of that weir and say, oh, the sediment load is here, and that's going to be an indicator to you of when you need to start doing some maintenance.
Great indicator.
Yeah.
Great indicator, because we typically don't have as-bills
Right.
for most of these ponds. So, what is the indicator without that weir?
Right.
The indicator without that weir, because remember, your inflow into the pond is what's going to build up
Right.
there. And it's
Right.
going to cast out over 15 foot, build up a foot or two, and start backing up that pipe.
Yep.
Right. So that's an indicator. But if you have a weir wall and you can capture some of that sediment up front and figure that out, that's a great thing to do.
Yeah, so somebody's gone out, the city's gone out, and they've poked the pond, and they've said the sediment's this deep. Well, it's not uniformly that deep all the way across the pond, right?
Correct.
So now you're having to, the city maybe or the county gave an estimate of what they thought the total tonnage was that needed to be removed, but now you've got to actually put numbers to it.
Absolutely.
So how do you justify or verify? We're going to give them a starting number, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of contingency assumptions built into that. So what are some of those assumptions? It's going to be this much if.
Well, exactly that, right. So one of the first things to consider on that pond, do we have hydrocarbons in the soil or not?
Yeah, you bet.
We're going to test that, because
And we know that those hydrocarbon signals are either generated by vehicles or
Right.
there can be a false positive signal
For organics.
given by organics.
That's right.
And so maybe even the city said, this is hot. You need to double check that with the lab.
So we're going to take that lab and do a TPH extended D.
Yeah, okay.
That's going to give us exactly what the constituent of concern, mostly diesel or benzenes, are.
Yep.
It gets past the organics.
Right.
TPH extended D will get
Okay.
us there. So back to your point, right? The city probes it. Here's an estimated quantity we have. It's hard because typically you're looking at a pond that's underwater at times.
Yeah, right.
Half of them are underwater. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we come in and do as a contractor is, first of all, we dewater it.
Yeah.
You just got to dewater the pond
Yeah.
and get down and see what you have. You can go in with an assumption. So we can go in with an assumption and say, we're going to haul off 200 tons of contaminated soil. That's our assumption.
Okay.
Right? So you dewater it, you get started, you're bailing material out, you see what you have, you're coming up on 200, maybe you're 150. Boy, we've got quite a bit more material, at least 100 tons more than what we had.
Yeah.
So we look at the owner and say, what do you want to do? Do you want to finish clean this thing out, or do you want to leave part of it in? We'll throw it up on the banks. We'll move it around. We'll smooth it out. So the inlet of the pond is not blocked.
Yes.
So you can leave some on site. Now, a lot of the cities aren't worried about the retention of the pond and the volume of the cubic mass in it. They're more worried about, is the inlet and the outlet functioning right?
The flowability
The
of
flowability.
Okay.
So when you look at a pond and you've got an incoming, run it right down the middle to the outflow, right? Take that material, throw it up on the sides. Make sure your vegetation's cleaned up. Make sure it's clean. So those are the parameters that if we've got a limited budget, but we have to do it,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that, I work with a lot of property owners, and they said, "Oh, I got inspected by the city. They said I need to clean out my pond." My first question is, "Do you have the as-built?" The
No.
first answer is no. And then they say, "But call the city because they approved it." I know, but they approved this 10 years ago, and they light their records on fire after 7 years. So here is my contingency. We're going to go in and clean it up, assuming that it's this. The only way for me to explore that is with a bucket.
Yeah.
And if I rip into a liner, my cost just changed. Or if I get magic media, you've got some kind of sub-drain system in here or magic media in here, that's going to change those assumptions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, especially a liner. Right?
Yeah, you bet.
So, I mean, part of the pre-inspection has to take a shovel and go out and see if we've got a liner.
Yeah.
We got to do that before you can actually put a bid on it.
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the vegetation that's in there. A lot of these ponds have invasive species or at least nuisance species like cattails. Cattails are nuisance species and things like that. Not a lot of places want that stuff. There's not a lot of like recyclers that want it. You got wet, heavy material that now you got this added tonnage that you're going to potentially get charged for at a landfill. So let's talk about some creative ways of managing some of those nuisance species and disposal.
Absolutely. So cattails, like you said, no recycler's going to take them.
Yeah.
They don't want them. They are landfillable. Right?
Okay.
So, what we do with cattails, thick cattails, right, is we walk in to a pond with an X-Fair. We start in the center line, start pulling those cattails back. We're typically throwing them up on a bank or pressing them.
Yeah.
With either the bucket or the tracks on the X-Fair.
Trying to dewater them some way.
Trying to dewater them. And,
Yeah.
and what I'm talking about, we're not just laying a 6-inch layer down. We're laying a 6-foot layer down.
Yeah.
So we've spread that out within our containments.
Mm-hmm.
We've walked the excavator out and we let it dry for a couple of days, and then we load it out.
Okay.
So we'll load that out into, for example, a waste management can that's direct for landfill.
Okay.
So we're not going to rehandle it again. Once we put it in, it's out and gone. Good cattails are dewatered right. You can fill up a 170-yard container.
Wow.
If you don't dewater them, you're going to fill it halfway up.
Yeah.
And it's a per can price.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, and then there's other things that come into play when we're talking about like Himalayan blackberry or some of these other invasive species that we have to be careful about mowing or segmenting the plant because then it becomes further broadcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, grabbing those things with the X-Fair, grabbing the roots, pulling those into what we're doing and moving those along, you've got to look at them.
Yeah.
You just have to look at what you have at the end of your bucket and what am I doing with it.
Yeah. So so oftentimes you have to have other specialty potentially I'm not going to call them landscapers, but there's sort of a phase to this. Like if you've got a real nasty invasive in there, you got to have people pulling that out, and those have to be handled and disposed of separately before you can even start moving earth.
Yep.
Or
Absolutely.
have you ever used goats?
Yes.
Have you?
Yes.
How's the goat thing work out?
Not too good. Sheep herders have a tendency to go off on their own somewhere.
Yeah.
Forget about the goats.
Yeah.
They get out. I mean, it's not a fun thing.
Yeah, I think it's novel and nice, but the amount of poop that they leave afterwards, and anyway, the goat thing is always interesting. So also let's talk about, let's say that we can't dewater, or dewatering is going to be a challenge either because of the time of the year and the mandate that's on this pond to be managed. What are practices? What are things that you can do to give yourself a dry work environment even when there's water in the pond?
Well, I would say typically 50% of our ponds we're working in the water.
Okay.
You just are. So, if you've got a hard bottom, you just walk the excavator in.
Okay.
We've done that a lot.
Okay.
Right? And your tracks are underwater. Your cab of your excavator's skimming the water.
Yeah.
Right. 4 or 5 feet deep. Most ponds aren't that deep.
Okay.
So you can size your excavator for what pond use you're working. So, for example, I'm not going to walk into a 4 foot deep pond with a little 160 excavator.
Yeah.
Or a mini.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out and find a 250 or a 300 or a 350 and make that application work. The other thing is a lot of times when you still have to work in a wet pond are using what we call these crane mats.
Yeah.
They're 7 by 12, engineered, 7 inches thick, and you walk on those while you're doing your excavation.
Yeah, and you can get the clean water off the top. So you're walking out sort of on mucky soil with those track pads. But let's say that there are 2 feet of water over the top. If you're able to put a cofferdam through the middle of the pond, you can pump the clean water over the top of the cofferdam, and then you can walk your track pads out, and all the clean water's back on this side of the pond.
Absolutely.
So you can segment your pond into cells, if you will.
Yep.
To where you're doing your active removal.
Correct.
And then move the water to the opposite side of those.
Absolutely. After it's settled
Coffer
down,
wells.
just jump
Yep.
back over.
Yep.
Right. Pumping the water from one to the other.
Exactly.
Right.
So you're giving yourself as dry of a work environment as possible.
Exactly. By moving that water,
Yeah.
which, it needs to be done because once you get in there, that water is just hammered.
Yeah.
I mean, it's muddy. You're not seeing through it. It's just ugly.
Yeah.
You can't discharge it.
Right.
You're walking in a soup bowl for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a time element too to when you can put that pond back online, because you got to get all that stuff to settle back out.
There is, for like example, we did Costco's pond out in Issaquah, right?
Yeah.
And our NTUs were 25.
That was the limit of discharge. Yeah.
Going out to the adjacent creek. We were lucky enough to do that the way you're talking, where we didn't need treatment.
Okay.
It went out.
Yeah.
The NTUs went out at minus 25, monitored.
Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah.
Right. And, but there was a time that, we had all of our water stuff set up, our controls, our charcoal and everything, that if we were to exceed that 25, we flipped the switch onto the system and around it went.
Yeah.
Now, there's a big cost savings in setting it up and having it ready.
So you're
running.
always putting that contingency in, because
Absolutely.
if you are having to discharge the water, so because of a storm event comes through or whatever, you can't put your equipment underwater.
No.
And you have to keep going.
You have to keep going. So special circumstances, when you're looking at, for example, a wet pond that is not discharging into a creek or that you can contain,
Yeah.
right? That's one thing. But when you can't, right, the volume of water coming in this is a 7.5 acre pond,
Yeah.
right? It was 21 million gallons.
Lake Winnemataka.
Just about. And we just pumped that thing down and out it went. But you had to set up that treatment system because if it rained one night, we were using that treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having those things in as contingencies and making sure that that's all in place. And
Yeah.
I think our experience has said that we do the best assumption that we can for what is known.
Correct.
And we take those knowns, but when you're cost estimating and you're load estimating, there has to be a lot of contingencies built into that.
There does. But again, that's a responsibility of the contractor to let the owner know, because a lot of times in pond maintenance, the contractor is more well experienced than a consultant.
That's right.
Or an engineer.
Yeah, sure.
Because we're the ones doing it.
Yep.
Right. So when the engineering group for Costco came to us and said, hey, we need to clean out this pond.
Yeah.
Right. They weren't even thinking about testing it for hydrocarbons.
Yeah. Right.
They hadn't even crossed their mind.
Right.
Great group, smart guys.
Yeah.
Hadn't even thought about it. 2 ponds passed, right? They
Yeah.
were under 200.
Yeah.
200 parts per million for hydrocarbon. 2 ponds passed. The biggest one did not.
Yeah.
10 samples, over 2,000, but it was the main pond catching all the runoff from
Yeah.
parking lots.
And that changes your disposal locations. It changes
Oh,
the
my God.
mob.
It changed
changes
everything.
all of the. It changes the whole profiling of the cost of the project.
It does. It does. We actually, on that job, we actually set those crane mats, 107 of them, out. That was a change order, because I was going to walk into the pond and walk on the bare soil, the bottom.
Yeah.
And when I went down and get one of the permits, the older inspector in there in his 70s said, "Kid, you gonna clean that pond out?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "How you gonna do that?" I said, "I'm gonna walk right into it with the excavator, dewater it and get to it." He said, "Well, you gonna bury your excavator?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yep, there's no bottom in that pond. It's muck." So I had a change order for those pads.
Isn't that interesting? You got it from sort of anecdotal or historical knowledge of the person that
Absolutely.
had been around, but there's no documented proof.
No documented proof. So we used those crane mats for the first 2 ponds the first year.
Yeah.
I stored them at my yard, and then when we came back the second year, we used them again.
Yeah.
So again, we sampled the soils, and it was mud. I mean, this is level excavator bucket level material. We walked it down. We used the Menrokas. We're out in the pond. We're loading them. They're running on these crane mats back and forth. We dumped them in a ecology block containment, the material. Right next to that was sawdust.
Yeah.
That we brought in. We mixed it 1-to-1 with sawdust. Now, I'm not adding weight with sawdust, because we all know that's pretty light, because they're paying by the ton at Waste Management, get rid of it. But if I didn't add sawdust to it, I couldn't liquefy. I couldn't build
couldn't
it up
move it.
enough. I couldn't move it.
Yeah.
I couldn't put anything in a truck.
Yeah. It would just slosh out the back.
It just slosh out the back. So we picked it up. We fire hosed our tailgates to keep it in. As a matter of fact, the city inspector from the city of Issaquah, we all met after the job was done. And she came to us and she said, "I just want to let you know I followed a lot of your trucks out. And if you had ever dropped 1 drop of mud on my street, I was going to make you put in 26 catch basins all the way down your traffic route to the highway." And I never saw anything.
That's great.
"Good job, Paul,"
Yeah.
she said.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God we know what we're doing.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right. Well, I think that's sort of the summary of this whole thing is, if you ever get inspected by someone that a city comes up and they inspect your pond and they say, you need to have this maintained. One, there's going to be probably more cost than you anticipated. But two, you really shouldn't have let that pond get to that point, and you need to start building in a maintenance program for that. It's just like a glorified catch basin insert,
Yep.
although it has more complexity to it, because now you have potentially other vegetation that you got to deal with. You've got materials that are soft and that typically, have gone in quote unquote a Vactor truck, but a Vactor truck is going to sit there for 5 minutes, suck up, get full, and then you're going to have to drive it for 3 hours to a decant facility. You're going to be completely ineffective.
Not financially effective.
Yeah. So I think that the take home from all this is pond management is a thing. It has some considerations, and you need people that have some creativity and expertise to be able to do it cost effectively, and you got to get on a routine maintenance schedule.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And get the contractors out early.
Yeah.
I mean, why wait?
Yeah.
Get them out. I mean, even if you haven't gotten a letter, it's your due diligence as an HOA president
Yeah.
or secretary or whatever title you have to get this into the budget. Even if you got 3 years to get it done, at least you know what number to plug in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you? Estimates are free.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway,
Well, if you ever need anything, Paul can get it done.
just yell. We'll get to it.
We get it done.
Yep.
Thanks for being here, Paul. Thanks for being part of Puddlecast. Join us next time.
My pleasure, Nate. Thanks.
Thank you to today's special guest. Join us again on the next Puddlecast.